The council chamber fell silent as the holographic display showed another destroyed colony. Smoke rose from burning buildings while emergency signals blinked weakly across the screen. It was the fourth attack in 2 months. The Vraks were getting bolder. Captain Han Minji stood at the back of the massive chamber watching the alien diplomats argue. Some wanted war. Others wanted to abandon the outer colonies entirely. None of them seemed to understand what they were dealing with. She had spent 3 years studying the Vraks from afar, analyzing every scrap of data, every blurry image, every intercepted communication. The council saw monsters. Minji saw something else entirely. Admiral Park Hyun sat in the human delegation section, his weathered face expressionless. He had served in the Frontier Corps for 30 years and knew better than most how dangerous the galaxy could be. When the Galactic Council had first made contact with humanity 20 years ago, many alien species had underestimated humans. Some still did, but the Vraks were different. They were apex predators from a harsh world, and they had been raiding Council territory with frightening efficiency. A tall, insectoid ambassador from the Quiller species clicked its mandibles in frustration. We must respond with overwhelming force. Show these beasts that the Council will not tolerate such aggression. Your species tried that already, someone muttered. The Quillar ambassador's antennae twitched in anger but said nothing. Everyone remembered what happened when the Quillers sent their war fleet to Vrak space. Only 2 ships returned. Dr. Kang Sora, sitting next to Admiral Hyun, leaned over and whispered something. The Admiral nodded slowly, then raised his hand to speak. The Council moderator recognized him with obvious reluctance. Humans were still relatively new to galactic politics, and many older species considered them too young and reckless. The human delegation wishes to propose an alternative approach, Admiral Hyun said, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation system. We believe diplomatic contact should be attempted before further military action. The chamber erupted in protests. A dozen species began speaking at once, their translators creating a cacophony of disagreement. The moderator struggled to restore order. Diplomatic contact? The Quiller ambassador's voice dripped with contempt. The Vraks have ignored every attempt at communication. They destroy our ships on sight. They are nothing but animals. Minji felt her jaw tighten. She had heard this kind of talk before. Fear disguised as certainty. Ignorance wrapped in confidence. She had written 17 reports about Vrak social structures, their territorial patterns, their communication methods. Every single report had been filed away and ignored. Admiral Hyun remained calm. We have someone willing to make the attempt. Captain Han Minji has extensive experience in xenobiology and first contact situations. She has studied the Vraks more thoroughly than anyone else in Council space. All eyes turned to Minji. She felt the weight of hundreds of alien gazes, some curious, most dismissive, a few openly hostile. She stepped forward, her boots echoing on the polished floor. The Vraks are not mindless predators, Minji said clearly. Their attack patterns show coordination and strategy. Their social structures suggest complex communication. They have technology sophisticated enough for interstellar travel. These are not the behaviors of simple animals. Then why do they attack without warning? Another ambassador demanded. Why do they refuse all contact? Maybe because we never contacted them properly, Minji replied. We expanded into their territory without announcement. We treated their space like it was empty. To a species with strong territorial instincts, that would be seen as an act of aggression. The chamber buzzed with conversation. Some aliens seemed to consider her words. Others clearly thought she was insane. Dr. Sora stood up beside the Admiral. She was one of humanity's leading experts in xenopsychology, and her reputation carried weight even among skeptical alien species. I have reviewed Captain Minji's research. Her analysis is sound. The Vraks display behaviors consistent with a pack-oriented warrior culture, not a mindless swarm. If anyone can make contact, she can. And if she fails? The moderator asked quietly. Minji answered before anyone else could. Then I fail. But at least we will have tried. At least we will have treated them with the respect intelligent beings deserve. The vote took less than an hour. Most species voted yes, not because they believed in Minji's mission, but because they expected her to die quickly. One human volunteer was an acceptable loss if it bought the Council time to build up their fleets. Admiral Hyun knew it, Dr. Sora knew it. Minji knew it. Later that evening, Minji sat in the briefing room with both of them. A holographic star map floated above the table, showing the route to Vrak space. It looked deceptively short. 3 weeks of travel through the outer veil, a region of space filled with stellar dust and sensor-blocking radiation. You don't have to do this, Admiral Hyun said quietly. The Council expects you to fail. This is a suicide mission. I know, Minji replied. She studied the map, committing every detail to memory. But I'm right about them. I know I am. Dr. Sora pulled up a series of images on her datapad. Blurry surveillance photos showed massive, wolf-like creatures with crystalline growths on their bodies. Their eyes glowed in the darkness. Their claws looked sharp enough to tear through hull plating. These are the only clear images we have. The Vraks are physically powerful, possibly 10 times stronger than a human. Their natural armor can withstand small arms fire. They hunt in packs and show tactical awareness. They also have art, Minji added, pulling up her own files. Look at their ship designs. Those patterns aren't random. They're decorative, symbolic. You don't develop symbolic thinking without complex language and culture. Admiral Hyun smiled slightly. It was the first time Minji had seen him smile in weeks. You really believe you can talk to them? I believe they're worth talking to, Minji said. Humanity spent thousands of years learning to live alongside apex predators on Earth. We befriended wolves. We partnered with them. If we could do that with Earth's predators, maybe we can do it with the Vraks. Wolves didn't have starships and plasma weapons, Dr. Sora pointed out gently. No, Minji agreed, but the principle is the same. Respect their nature. Don't treat them like enemies or animals. Treat them like equals who speak a different language. The Admiral stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. Your ship leaves at dawn. The scout vessel Wanderer has been prepped for long-range travel. Minimal weapons, maximum sensors. If things go wrong, you won't be able to fight your way out. I don't plan to fight, Minji said. I know, he replied. That's why I approved this mission. Anyone can start a war, Captain. It takes real courage to try for peace. That night, Minji couldn't sleep. She lay in her quarters, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what awaited her. The Vraks had killed thousands. They had destroyed colonies and fleets. Every rational part of her mind said this was madness. But something deeper, something instinctive, told her she was right. She had spent her whole life studying how different species thought, how they communicated, how they saw the universe. The Vraks weren't monsters. They were just very, very different. When dawn came, Minji walked to the hangar bay. The Wanderer waited there, small and fragile-looking compared to the military vessels surrounding it. Admiral Hyun and Dr. Sora came to see her off. Neither of them said goodbye. They simply nodded, respecting her choice. Minji climbed into the cockpit and ran through the pre-flight checks. Everything was ready. She took a deep breath, whispered a quiet prayer to whatever gods might be listening, and launched into the black. Behind her, the station grew smaller and smaller until it vanished among the stars. Ahead of her lay the outer veil and the unknown territory of the Vraks. She was going to meet the galaxy's most feared predators. And somehow she was going to make them listen. 3 weeks in the outer veil had given Minji plenty of time to think. Too much time, perhaps. The stellar dust made navigation difficult, and the radiation meant she couldn't maintain constant communication with Council space. She was truly alone out here, surrounded by clouds of cosmic debris that glowed faintly in her ship's lights. She had spent every waking hour reviewing what little data existed on the Vraks. Their language seemed to involve sound, electromagnetic pulses, and possibly pheromones. Their ships moved in formation patterns that suggested pack hunting strategies. Their territorial boundaries were clearly marked with what appeared to be warning buoys, though the Council had dismissed them as random debris. Minji knew better. She had watched recordings of those markers over and over. They were placed too deliberately, too symmetrically. They were messages that said, "This is ours," in a language the Council had never bothered to learn. The alert alarm jolted her from her thoughts. 3 ships had appeared on her sensors, emerging from the dust clouds like sharks from murky water. They were larger than her scout vessel, angular and aggressive in design. Vrak ships. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was the moment everything depended on. She reached for the weapons console, then deliberately powered it down. Next, she cut her engines to minimal power, just enough to maintain position. She was making herself vulnerable, showing she wasn't a threat. In the language of predators, running meant prey, fighting meant enemy. But staying still, showing confidence without aggression, that was different. Minji activated her communication array and began broadcasting on multiple frequencies. She had prepared this message carefully with Dr. Sora's help. It wasn't words exactly. It was a series of electromagnetic pulses, arranged in a pattern that matched what they had observed from Vrax's communications. The message was simple: acknowledgement, respect, request for contact. For several long minutes, nothing happened. The Vrax ship circled her vessel, their movements coordinated and predatory. Minji kept her hands away from the controls, forcing herself not to make any sudden movements. She had studied pack hunters on Earth. She knew that panic triggered the chase instinct. Then her ship shuddered. Something had locked onto her hull. Magnetic clamps, she realized. They were boarding her. Minji stood up from her pilot's seat and moved to the center of the small cabin. She kept her posture upright, shoulders back. Not aggressive, but not submissive either. The way you would face a wolf, she reminded herself. Confident, but respectful. The airlock hissed and groaned as it was forced open from outside. Minji's suit sensors detected a rush of different atmospheric pressure, quickly equalized by her ship's systems. Then they came through. The first Vrax that entered barely fit through the doorway. It had to duck its massive head and turn sideways to squeeze its shoulders through. Minji had seen the photos, but nothing had prepared her for the reality. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body covered in dark fur and crystalline plates that caught the light like polished obsidian. Its eyes, 6 of them arranged in 2 rows, glowed with an amber light. Its mouth held teeth that could easily tear through metal. Behind the first came 2 more, slightly smaller but no less intimidating. They moved with fluid grace despite their size, filling her small ship with their presence. The smell was overwhelming, something like hot metal and ozone mixed with animal musk. The largest Vrax stepped forward, studying her with those multiple eyes. Minji held her ground, meeting its gaze steadily. She had read that in many predator species, looking away was a sign of submission or fear. She couldn't afford either right now. The creature made a sound, a deep rumbling that vibrated through Minji's chest. Then it released an electromagnetic pulse she could feel as a tingling on her skin. It was trying to communicate, but she couldn't understand the full meaning yet. Slowly, carefully, Minji raised her hands to show they were empty. Then she touched her chest, saying clearly, "Minji." She repeated the gesture, pointing to herself. "Minji." The Vrax tilted its massive head, an almost dog-like gesture that would have been endearing if the creature wasn't so terrifying. It made another sound, this one shorter and sharper. Then it pointed to itself with a clawed hand and said something that sounded like Rax. Minji felt a surge of hope so strong it almost made her dizzy. It had given her a name. That was more than simple animals did. That was the beginning of communication. "Rax," she repeated, pointing to the large Vrax. Then she pointed to the others, her expression questioning. The second Vrax, younger and with fewer scars, made a chirping sound and touched its chest. Tiva. The third, with darker crystalline growth, simply growled and turned away. Clearly, not all of them were interested in talking. Rax made a series of complex sounds and electromagnetic pulses. The meaning was unclear, but the intent seemed obvious. He wanted her to come with them. Minji nodded slowly and gestured to show she understood. The Vrax didn't restrain her or threaten her. They simply waited while she grabbed a small pack with basic supplies, then led her back through the airlock into their ship. The interior was dim and smelled strongly of the Vrax themselves. The walls were lined with the same crystalline material that grew on their bodies. As they walked, Minji noticed markings on the walls, scratched into the crystal. Symbols, she realized. Writing, or at least record-keeping. The journey to their homeworld took 2 days. During that time, Minji was kept in a small chamber that might have been quarters or might have been a cell. It was hard to tell, but they brought her food, strange meat, and something like fruit and water. The food was safe to eat according to her scanner, if not particularly pleasant to her human palate. Tiva visited her several times, seeming curious about the strange alien in their ship. The young Vrax would sit outside the chamber door and make sounds as if trying to teach Minji their language. Slowly, painfully slowly, Minji began to understand the basics. A certain pulse meant food. A low growl meant danger. A high chirp seemed to mean question or curious. When they arrived at the Vrax homeworld, Minji pressed her face to the small viewport in her chamber. The planet was beautiful in a harsh way. Volcanic mountains rose from plains covered in crystalline forests that glittered in the light of their red sun. Rivers of what looked like molten metal flowed through canyons. It was a world that would kill most council species within hours. But to the Vracs it was home. They landed near a large structure built into a mountainside. As Minji was led from the ship, she saw dozens of Vracs moving about, going about their daily lives. Cubs, smaller versions with softer fur, played roughly with each other under the watchful eyes of adults. Elderly Vracs with faded crystalline growth sat in groups, their electromagnetic pulses creating complex conversations Minji couldn't yet follow. Rax led her through the settlement to a large open space surrounded by high walls. Other Vracs gathered to watch, their eyes glowing in the shadows. Minji felt like she was being brought before a court or perhaps an arena. Rax made a long, complex series of sounds and pulses. Then he pointed to the distant mountain range and made a sharp gesture. Minji didn't need a translator to understand. She was being tested. Tiva approached and placed something in Minji's hands. It was a small crystalline blade, simple but sharp. Then the young Vrax made a series of gestures that Minji interpreted as instructions. Survive. Return. Prove yourself. As the sun began to set, painting the crystalline forests in shades of red and orange, Minji found herself alone at the edge of the wilderness. The Vrac settlement was behind her, and ahead lay mountains and forests filled with unknown dangers. She had no communication device, no advanced technology, just the knife, her training, and her wits. She looked back once at the settlement. Rax stood on the walls watching her with his multiple eyes. Tiva was there too, and even the grumpy third Vrax, Krell. They were waiting to see what she would do. Minji turned toward the wilderness and began walking. She had 3 days to survive in an alien environment that would kill most humans within hours. 3 days to prove that humans were more than just soft, weak prey. 3 days to show the Vrax that Earth had produced its own kind of apex predator, one that didn't rely on claws and teeth but on intelligence, determination, and the refusal to quit. The crystalline forest swallowed her, the strange trees reflecting the last light of the red sun. Behind her, the Vrax watched and waited. Ahead of her lay the greatest challenge of her life. The first night almost killed her. Minji had found shelter in a cave formed by overlapping crystalline formations. The structures were beautiful but deadly sharp, and she had already cut her hands twice trying to navigate through them. As darkness fell, the temperature dropped rapidly. Her suit could regulate heat, but it wasn't designed for extreme volcanic environments. She shivered despite the insulation, huddling against the warmest wall she could find. Strange sounds echoed through the crystal forest. Howls, clicks, and deep rumbling growls that made the ground vibrate. Native predators, she assumed. This world was full of them. The Vrax were the apex predators, but that didn't mean they were the only hunters. Minji forced herself to think logically. What would a Vrax do in this situation? They wouldn't hide and hope to survive. They would establish territory, mark their presence, make it clear they weren't prey to be hunted. She gathered loose rocks and arranged them at the cave entrance, creating a barrier that would make noise if disturbed. Then she found sharp crystal shards and placed them strategically, creating basic traps. It wasn't much, but it was something. She was telling any potential predators that this space was claimed, that entering would have consequences. It was the language of territory, and hopefully, the creatures here would understand it. As she worked, she thought about why the Vrax had attacked council colonies. The council had expanded into the outer veil without announcement, without acknowledgement of existing territory. They had treated empty space as truly empty, ignoring the fact that the Vrax clearly considered it theirs. To a species with strong territorial instincts, that wasn't just rude. It was a declaration of war. A sound outside the cave jerked her back to alertness. Something was moving through the crystal forest. Something big. Minji gripped her small knife and positioned herself where she could see the entrance, but wasn't silhouetted against the cave's dim light. A shadow passed by the entrance. Then another. Whatever was out there, there were at least 2 of them. Minji held her breath, every muscle tense. The creatures stopped at her barrier and she heard sniffing sounds. They had caught her scent. One of them pushed against the rocks. The barrier shifted but held. Minji had wedged the stones carefully, and the noise of them grinding together was loud in the quiet night. The creatures outside made frustrated sounds and withdrew. Minji let out a shaky breath. It had worked. She had established that this territory was defended, and the predators had decided it wasn't worth the effort to challenge her. It was a small victory, but it felt enormous. The second day was harder. Minji needed water and food. Her suit could recycle water for a while, but not indefinitely. and she had eaten the last of her emergency rations that morning. She needed to find resources, which meant leaving her shelter. She moved carefully through the crystal forest, watching for signs of water. On Earth, she would follow animal trails or look for green vegetation. Here, everything was different. The crystalline plants didn't need water the way Earth plants did. They seemed to draw energy directly from the volcanic heat beneath the surface. But there had to be water somewhere. The Vracs needed it. She had seen them drink on their ship. She just needed to find it. A sound made her freeze. Not the random noises of the forest, but something specific. A chirping call that she recognized. Tiva. The young Vrax was following her. Minji turned slowly and saw Tiva crouched on top of a crystal formation about 50 meters away. The Vrax made another chirping sound, almost playful. Then Tiva bounded away through the forest with incredible speed and agility. Was this part of the test? Minji hesitated, then decided to follow. Tiva had been the friendliest of the Vrax. If the young warrior was trying to help her, refusing that help might be insulting. And if this was a test of her ability to track and follow, she needed to pass it. Tiva led her on a winding path through the forest, always staying just visible ahead. The young Vrax would stop occasionally, waiting until Minji caught up, then dart away again. It reminded Minji of the way dogs would play, running ahead and looking back to make sure their human was following. After an hour of this chase, Minji emerged into a clearing where a pool of clear water bubbled up from underground. It was warm, probably heated by volcanic activity, but her scanner said it was safe to drink. Tiva sat beside the pool, watching her with those multiple glowing eyes. Minji approached slowly, knelt by the water, and drank deeply. It tasted metallic but good. She refilled her water containers while Tiva watched. When she was done, she looked at the young Vrax and said, "Thank you." Tiva made a soft chirping sound that might have been acknowledgement. Then the Vrax gestured to the forest and made a series of pulses. The meaning was clear enough. Keep going, survive. The test wasn't over. The third day brought the real challenge. Minji was following what she thought might be edible plants, strange fungus-like growths on the shaded side of crystals, when she heard Tiva's voice. But this time it wasn't playful. It was a warning cry, sharp and urgent. Minji spun around and saw the predator. It was massive, easily twice the size of a Vrax with 6 legs and a body covered in razor-sharp crystal spines. Its mouth opened to reveal 3 rows of teeth and its eyes fixed on something in the distance. Tiva. The young Vrax was caught in the open, between crystal formations with no cover. The predator was stalking closer, its body low to the ground. Tiva was young, maybe inexperienced. The creature saw an opportunity for an easy kill. Every survival instinct in Minji's body screamed at her to hide, to let nature take its course, to stay safe. But another instinct, deeper and more human, overrode those thoughts. Tiva had helped her. Tiva was pack in a strange way. And you didn't abandon your pack. Minji grabbed the sharpest crystal shard she could find, a piece as long as her forearm, and ran toward the predator. She screamed as loud as she could, making herself sound bigger and more dangerous than she was. The creature's attention snapped to her, confused by this small, loud thing charging at it. The predator turned from Tiva and lunged at Minji instead. She dove to the side, feeling claws tear through her suit and scrape across her shoulder. Pain exploded through her arm, but she kept moving. She couldn't match this thing in strength or speed. She needed to be smarter. The creature came at her again, and this time Minji was ready. She rolled under its bulk and drove her crystal shard upward into its softer underbelly. The predator shrieked and thrashed, throwing her aside. She hit the ground hard, her vision blurring, but the wound was serious. The predator stumbled, dark blood pouring from the gash. It tried to come at her again, but Tiva crashed into it from the side, claws and teeth tearing. The young Vrax was smaller than the predator, but fierce and desperate. Together, their combined attack was too much. The creature fled, trailing blood and limping badly. Minji lay on the ground, breathing hard. Her shoulder burned, and she could feel blood soaking her suit. Tiva approached carefully, making soft, concerned sounds. The young Vrax sniffed at her wound, then made a sharp barking call. Within minutes, other Vrax appeared. Rax was among them, and even the surly Krell. They looked at the blood, at the wounded predator's tracks, at Minji lying on the ground. Rax made a long, complex series of sounds and pulses. Minji didn't need a perfect translation to understand the tone. Surprise, respect, maybe even approval. They carried her back to the settlement, gentle despite their strength. The Vrax healer, an older female with pale crystals, treated her wound with surprising skill. The medicine burned but worked quickly, sealing the gash and fighting off infection. That night, Rax came to where Minji was resting. The massive Vrax leader sat down, which put him closer to her eye level, and studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He placed his clawed hand over his chest in the same gesture Minji had used to introduce herself, and said in heavily accented but understandable human words, "Pack friend." Minji felt tears prick her eyes. She had survived. More than that, she had proven something crucial. She had shown the Vrax that humans understood pack loyalty, that they would risk themselves to protect others, that they had the same values the Vrax held sacred. Over the next week, Minji's understanding of the Vrax language grew rapidly. Tiva became her constant companion and teacher, patiently repeating words and phrases until Minji could communicate basic ideas. She learned that the Vrax had been defending their territory from something worse than Council expansion. There was another threat coming from deep space, something the Vrax called the Skarn, parasites that consumed everything in their path. The Vrax raids on Council colonies had been attempts to create a buffer zone, to warn the Council away from areas that would soon become war zones. But the Council hadn't understood. They had seen only aggression, not desperate defense. "We tried to warn," Rax explained one evening as they sat around a heat pit. "Council ships ignored our markers. They flew into Skarn territory. They brought death back to our borders." Minji understood now. The Vrax weren't the enemy. They were the first line of defense against something far worse, something the Council didn't even know existed yet, and they had been fighting alone because nobody bothered to learn their language or understand their culture. "Let me help," Minji said. "Let me speak to the Council. Let me make them." The Vrax Council chamber was unlike anything the Galactic Council would recognize. There were no comfortable seats or diplomatic protocols. It was a massive cave deep in the mountain, lit by glowing crystals and heated by volcanic vents. Vrax warriors packed the space, their eyes gleaming in the dim light, their electromagnetic pulses creating a constant background hum of conversation. Minji stood in the center with Tiva beside her. She wore new clothing the Vrax had made for her, practical and tough, with crystal armor pieces protecting her vital areas. The scar on her shoulder had healed into a mark she now wore with pride. Rax addressed the gathered warriors in the Vrax language, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. Minji understood most of it now. He was explaining her proposal: alliance with the Council, joint defense against the Skarn, recognition of Vrax territory. It sounded simple when summarized, but the reality was complex and dangerous. An old warrior with gray fur and cracked crystals stood up. His name was Vorn, and he was one of the most respected elders. "Why should we help the Council? They invaded our territory. They ignored our warnings. They are weak prey species who would slow us in battle." Krell, the suspicious warrior who had never quite warmed to Minji, growled his agreement. "The human is brave for a prey creature, but one human does not represent all Council species. Most cannot fight. Most cannot even survive on our world for one day." Minji had expected this resistance. She stepped forward, and Tiva moved with her, a show of support that didn't go unnoticed. "May I speak?" Rax gestured his permission. The cave fell silent except for the hiss of volcanic vents. "You're right," Minji said clearly. "Many Council species are not warriors like the Vrax. They are builders, thinkers, creators. They have different strengths. But that doesn't make them worthless." She pulled up a holographic display from her datapad showing images from Earth. "My world has many apex predators, powerful hunters that could kill humans easily. But humans didn't conquer them through strength alone. We learned to work with them. We befriended wolves and they became our hunting partners. We respected tigers and learned to share territory. We studied sharks and they taught us about the oceans." An older female warrior, Nasa, leaned forward with interest. "Your species makes pack with other predators?" "Yes," Minji said. "Because we understand something important. Different strengths make the pack stronger. Wolves have better senses and speed. Humans have tools and planning. Together we could hunt prey that neither could catch alone." She changed the holographic display to show Council species and their capabilities. These species have technology the Vrax don't possess. Faster ships, better sensors, Medical advances that could help wounded warriors. They're not useless. They're just specialized differently. Vorn snorted. Specialized in running away. Specialized in supporting warriors, Minji corrected. Every pack needs members who do different things. Some fight, some scout, some heal, some plan. The Vraks understand this. Your own packs have different roles, don't they? There was a ripple of acknowledgement through the chamber. Vrak society did have roles. Warriors, hunters, healers, builders, caregivers for the young. Not everyone fought on the front lines, but everyone contributed to the pack's survival. The council can be support for Vrak's warriors, Minji continued. Better weapons, better armor, intelligence about Skarn movements, medical care for wounded, food supplies for long campaigns. These things have value in war. Rax made a thoughtful sound. The human speaks truth. But there is another problem. The council species do not trust us. They see us as monsters. They will not want alliance. Then we prove them wrong, Minji said firmly. We show them what I learned. That Vraks have honor. That you fight to protect, not just to destroy. That you are capable of loyalty and friendship. Krell stood up, his posture aggressive. Why should we care what they think? Let them face the Skarn alone. Let them learn the hard way. Because the Skarn will destroy you too, Minji said quietly. You've been fighting them for years, haven't you? Losing territory slowly, losing warriors. The Skarn are overwhelming you because you face them alone. How much longer can you hold them back? The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone in the chamber knew the truth. The Skarn were winning. Slowly but inevitably, they were pushing into Vrak space. The raids on council colonies had been desperate attempts to create buffer zones to buy time, to somehow get help without knowing how to ask for it. NASA spoke up, her voice thoughtful. What the human says has merit. Our warriors are brave and strong, but the Skarn are endless. For every one we kill, 10 more come. We need numbers. We need allies. Allies who will betray us when convenient, Krell growled. Not if we make pact bond, Tiva said suddenly. The young warrior stepped forward, speaking with growing confidence. Minji proved herself. She protected me at risk of her own life. That is pact bond. If council species can learn this, if humans can teach them, then alliance is possible. Before anyone could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the settlement. Warriors jumped to their feet, reaching for weapons. A scout burst into the chamber, electromagnetic pulses crackling with urgency. Skarn! Large force approaching the outer territory markers. The council dissolved into organized chaos. Warriors rushed to defensive positions. Elders began evacuating young and non-combatants deeper into the mountain. Rax turned to Minji, his expression grim. You want to show that council species can fight beside Vrax? Here's your chance. Minji's heart raced, but she nodded. Where do you need me? With me, Rax said. You and your human tricks. Let's see if they work against the Skarn. They rushed to the outer walls where Vrax warriors were already assembling. Minji could see the approaching threat through viewing scopes. The Skarn were horrifying. Insectoid creatures the size of ground vehicles covered in chitinous armor that absorbed energy weapons. They moved in perfect coordination, like a single organism with 1,000 bodies. Standard tactics don't work well, Tiva explained quickly as they took positions. They absorb energy attacks. Physical weapons are better, but they overwhelm with numbers. We usually fight in tight formation, holding choke points. Minji studied the battlefield, her mind racing. The Vrax tactics were sound for their capabilities, but humans had different advantages. Do you have explosives?
Anything that can destroy terrain?
Some, Rax said. Crystal charges, why? Because humans learned something important about fighting swarms, Minji said. You don't fight them on open ground. You funnel them. Control their movement. Make them come to you through kill zones. She quickly sketched her plan using a piece of crystal on the ground. The Vrax warriors gathered around, listening intently. Place explosives to collapse certain approaches. Force the Skarn into narrow passages where their numbers become a disadvantage. Have warriors in elevated positions to attack from above. Use the terrain itself as a weapon. Krell studied the plan skeptically. This is prey thinking. Prey hides and sets traps. Prey survives, Minji countered. And sometimes prey becomes predator by thinking differently. Do you want to be honorable warriors or do you want to win? Rax made a barking sound that might have been laughter. She has you there, Krell. Honor means nothing if we're all dead. We try the humans' way. They had barely enough time to implement the plan before the Skarn reached them. Explosives were placed. Warriors repositioned to elevated spots. Traps were set along the approaches. Minji found herself on a wall section between Vrax and Tiva, gripping an energy rifle that was sized for Vrax and felt absurdly large in her human hands. The first Skarn reached their outer markers and kept coming, mindless in their advance. Minji waited, counting seconds, judging distances the way she had learned during her survival training. When the creatures reached the optimal position, she gave the signal. The explosions tore through the Skarn front lines and collapsed the crystal formations exactly as planned. The passage narrowed, forcing the creatures to bunch up to climb over their own dead. Vrax warriors rained fire from above, their physical projectile weapons punching through chitin armor that would have absorbed energy blasts. It was working. The Skarn were dying in droves, unable to use their numerical advantage in the confined space. But they kept coming, endless and relentless. Minji fired her weapon until it overheated, then grabbed crystal shards and hurled them like spears at the creatures below. A Skarn managed to climb the wall near Krell. The warrior fought viciously, but more were coming. Minji saw the problem immediately. The defenders were running out of ammunition and the Skarn were adapting, finding new routes. "We need to fall back to the second line," Minji shouted over the chaos. "Let them advance into the next trap." Vrax understood immediately. He called the retreat, and warriors fell back in organized waves while rear guards held the positions. The Skarn, sensing victory, surged forward into the settlement's outer district, where more explosives waited. The second detonation was larger, more devastating. It brought down entire crystal structures, creating an avalanche that buried hundreds of Skarn. The creatures that survived found themselves in another kill zone, facing fresh Vrax warriors in elevated positions. The battle raged for hours, but slowly the Skarn numbers dwindled. The first council ship to intercept them nearly opened fire. Minji's voice crackled over the communication channel, urgent and clear. "This is Captain Han Minji returning from Vrax space. Hold your fire. I repeat, hold your fire. I'm accompanied by Vrax representatives under diplomatic protection." The silence that followed was heavy with disbelief. Minji sat in her small scout ship's cockpit, flanked by two larger Vrax vessels. Behind her, Rax's massive form filled most of the passenger compartment. The other 5 Vrax warriors were aboard their own ships, close enough to respond to any threat. "Captain Minji," a shaking voice finally replied. It was a Quiller officer, his translator barely managing to convey his shock. "You were declared dead 6 weeks ago. How is this possible?" "It's a long story," Minji said. "I'm requesting immediate transport to the council station and an emergency session. I carry critical information about a threat to all council space." Another pause. Then, understood. "Escort ships are being dispatched. But Captain, if those Vrax ships make any hostile moves—" "They won't," Minji said firmly. "They're here as allies. As friends." "Give me a chance to explain." The journey to the council station felt longer than her entire trip into Vrax space. Word of her return spread quickly through the communication networks. By the time they docked, the station was in controlled chaos. Security forces lined every corridor, weapons ready. Diplomatic staff rushed to prepare the council chamber. News drones hovered everywhere, broadcasting the impossible sight of Vrax ships peacefully docking at a council station. Admiral Park Hyun was waiting at the airlock, his weathered face showing open relief. "Minji, we thought you were gone." "I had the same concern a few times," Minji admitted. Then she gestured behind her as Rax ducked through the airlock, followed by the other Vrax warriors. Security forces tensed, weapons rising. "Stand down," Admiral Hyun ordered sharply. His voice carried the authority of decades of command. "They're here under diplomatic protection." The Vrax were too large for the station's corridors, which had been built for smaller species. Rax had to move carefully, his shoulders scraping the walls. Dr. Sora appeared, staring at the massive warriors with open fascination. "Remarkable," she breathed. "Captain Minji, you actually did it. You made contact. I did more than that," Minji said. "I made friends." And they brought a warning. "The council needs to hear this immediately." The emergency session was called within hours. The council chamber filled with representatives from dozens of species, all staring at the 6 Vrax warriors who stood behind Minji's position. The creatures were massive, intimidating, and very clearly armed. Security forces surrounded them at a careful distance, useless weapons trained on beings who could shrug off most small arms fire. The Quiller ambassador who had called Vrax beasts months ago was notably pale. Several other ambassadors looked like they wanted to flee. Only the human delegation seemed calm, though Admiral Hyun kept his hand near his sidearm out of habit. The council moderator called for order, his voice barely steady. Captain Han Minji, you have requested this emergency session. Please explain why you have brought armed Vrax warriors into this chamber. Minji stood, feeling the weight of countless eyes on her. I bring them because they are not our enemies. They never were. The Vrax are a warrior culture, yes, but they are also intelligent, honorable, and capable of loyalty. Everything the council believed about them was wrong. They destroyed our colonies, someone shouted from the back. They were trying to warn you, Minji countered. There is a threat coming from deep space. The Skarn, a parasitic species that consumes everything in its path. The Vrax have been fighting them for years, trying to create buffer zones to protect themselves and inadvertently to protect you. When council ships ignored their territorial markers and flew into Skarn-infested space, they became vectors for the infestation. She pulled up holographic displays showing the Skarn, their spread pattern, their capabilities. The images were taken from Vrax records translated through weeks of careful work. The Skarn are coming. They move slowly but inevitably. The Vrax have been humanity's shield and didn't even know it. They've been fighting alone while the council called them monsters. Rax stepped forward and half the chamber flinched. The massive Vrax warrior spoke in careful, practiced human words. We are Vrax, we are warriors. We fight with honor. We protect pack and territory. Council species entered our territory without challenge. This is insult in our culture. We responded as we would to any challenge. His electromagnetic pulses filled the room, making everyone's skin tingle. But Minji showed us different way. She proved council species can have pack bond, can have loyalty, can have courage. She saved young warrior at risk of her own life. This is pack bond. This is honor we respect. Tiva stepped forward next, younger and less scarred but no less impressive. I would have died without Minji. She is pack friend. She taught us that different species can work together. Strong warriors and clever builders make stronger pack than either alone. The chamber erupted in debate. Some species were convinced by the display. Others remained skeptical or afraid. The Quiller ambassador stood, his mandibles clicking angrily. This proves nothing. We should arrest the human for treason and destroy those ships before they attack us. Before Minji could respond, alarms began screaming throughout the station. A communications officer rushed in, her face pale. Council moderator, we have a situation. Unknown ships are approaching from the outer system. They match the profiles Captain Minji provided. It's the Skarn. The chamber descended into chaos. Species began shouting, demanding action, calling for evacuations. The moderator struggled to restore order, while tactical displays showed the approaching threat. The Skarn ships moved in their characteristic swarm pattern, dozens of vessels advancing like locusts. Admiral Hyun's voice cut through the panic. All available defense forces to intercept positions. Civilian ships begin evacuation protocols. Your defense forces will not be enough, Rax said bluntly. Skarn overwhelm with numbers. They absorb energy weapons. They adapt quickly. Then what do you suggest? The Admiral demanded. Let us fight, Krell growled, speaking for the first time. We know how to kill Skarn. We have done it for years. But we need your support. Your ships for mobility. Your weapons for suppression. Your coordination for tactics. Minji stepped forward. I have a plan. But it requires trust. Complete trust. Admiral Hyun, I need command authority over a mixed force. Human Marines, Vrax warriors. Any council forces willing to work with us. The Admiral looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. You have it. Don't make me regret this. Within 30 minutes, a makeshift force was assembled. A dozen human Marines led by Lieutenant Bayek Junho, a veteran of the Frontier Corps. The 6 Vrax warriors. A handful of brave volunteers from other species, who were willing to try something unprecedented. They deployed in fast attack ships, moving to intercept the Skarn before they reached the station. Minji coordinated from the command ship, her voice steady as she issued orders. Vrax ships, you're our hammer. Hit them hard and fast. Human ships, you're our anvil. Herd them into kill zones. Volunteer forces provide support fire and watch our flanks. Junho's voice came through the comm. With all respect, Captain, are we really trusting the Vrax not to shoot us in the back? They're pack now, Minji said simply. They protect pack. Just make sure you do the same. The battle was chaos. Skarn ships swarmed like angry insects, their weapons biological and terrifying. But the combined force moved with unexpected coordination. Vrax warriors fought with savage efficiency, their ships ramming Skarn vessels and tearing them apart. Human ships used precision strikes and tactical maneuvers, creating openings the Vrax exploited ruthlessly. Tiva and Junho ended up fighting side by side when a Skarn boarding party invaded one of the human ships. The young Vrax warrior carved through chitinous bodies, while the human lieutenant laid down covering fire. When a Skarn nearly killed Junho from behind, Tiva was there, claws tearing through alien armor. "Thanks," Junho gasped, staring up at the massive warrior. Tiva made a chirping sound that might have been laughter. "Pakbon," the Vrax said in halting human words. "We protect." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it finally ended, the Skarn forces were destroyed or retreating. The combined force had taken casualties, but far fewer than would have been expected. The station was saved. Back in the council chamber, exhausted warriors and marines stood side by side. Vrax and humans covered in blood and ichor, breathing hard but alive. The council members who had watched the battle could not deny what they had seen. The Quiller ambassador, who had lost family to Vrax raids, approached Rax slowly. His mandibles trembled. "You saved us. You fought beside us." Rax looked down at the much smaller alien. "You are weak in body, but you were brave. You stayed when others fled. That is worthy." It wasn't exactly warm diplomacy, but it was a start. Over the following days, the alliance was formalized. The council recognized Vrax territory officially. Joint military operations were established to face the Skarn threat. Cultural exchange programs began, with humans serving as intermediaries between Vrax and other species. Minji found herself promoted to Special Envoy, a position created